those questions. I call Louisa Wall.
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair. It's my pleasure to take a call in this committee stage debate on the Energy Innovation, Electric Vehicles and Other Matters Amendment Bill. And I just want to highlight that this bill aims to encourage energy innovation. So I commend those on the Commerce Committee who have heard submissions. And I do have a question for the Minister and the Chair, but a little preamble before I get there. I'm particularly interested in Part 3, Section 17R, as my colleague Michael Wood has previously quoted in the House. And it really is from the regulatory impact, or the departmental disclosure statement about the empowerment through this piece of legislation of road controlling authorities to enable electric vehicles as well as plug-in hybrid vehicles that operate on a combination of externally charged batteries or petrol-diesel motor to be able to use what are currently designated as lanes for trucks, buses or cars who have multiple occupants. And I think the aspiration within this bill is really about increasing the number of electric vehicles we have in New Zealand. Currently we have 2,000, and I know by 2021 there's an aspiration that there will be 64,000. I found it interesting looking at the history of electric vehicles, and please bear with me, but the first electric vehicle was created in 1832 by Scottish inventor Robert Anderson. It's really interesting because in 1899 electric vehicles were seen as being the car of the future. And so having had a look at the history in 1900, the electric automobile in its heyday, so of 4,192 cars produced in the United States, 20% were powered by electricity. By 1920, however, there was a decline because of the viability of electric vehicles. The electric car's downfall was attributed to a number of factors, including the desire for longer distance vehicles, their lack of horsepower, and the readily available gasoline. In the 1970s, we saw a re-emergence of electric vehicles because of soaring prices of oil, so the Arab oil embargo of 1973, and also it was really then the emergence of environmental issues and the quest to look and explore the viability of electric vehicles. In February of 2009, the American Recovery and Investment Act of 2009 allocated $2 billion for the development of electric vehicle batteries and related technologies, and the Department of Energy added another $400 million to fund building the infrastructure necessary to support plug-in electric vehicles. And just to finish this contribution from this particular research, the challenges are seen as price, as my colleague Sue Moroney has highlighted, limited battery life and travel range, and building charging stations and other infrastructure to support electric vehicles. And so I've seen in New Zealand we have 20 charging stations. I may be wrong. There is an aspiration by December next year to have another 80. That costs approximately $60,000 per charging station. So we need an investment of $4.8 million, and it seems the private sector is putting their hand up. I've seen a press release from BMW and ChargeNet, and so their aspiration is to create a network from Kaitaia to Invercargill. And we have two pure EVs on sale in New Zealand. They're the BMW i3 and the Renault Zoe. And these charging stations apparently can charge a vehicle 80% in 20 minutes for a cost of $14. Now, where I'm going with this question was that I'm aware of a trial, and this is what I'd like the Minister to answer, in March of this year for 2 weeks on 5 motorway on and off ramps in Auckland, because in Auckland we have registered 1,033 electric vehicles. And so before, implementing this piece of legislation, we wanted to actually look at whether or not the intention of that Part 3, Section 17R was going to be utilised by those, Mr Chair,
Louisa Wall,
who own electric vehicles. And from what I've been able to ascertain, Auckland Transport also said we need an information campaign, because people need to know that the vehicles that are using those special lanes for trucks, buses, cars with multiple occupants, they need some sort of sticker, I think, so that the public become aware of why these cars are cruising down in lanes that actually have been reserved for those purposes. So NZTA was to survey the owners of electric vehicles, and I'm really interested in the results, and I'm hoping that the Minister has those. That was in March this year. Because it was quite interesting to note. So organisations like Mercury Energy have 42 electric cars. This is of those 1,033 registered electric vehicles in Auckland. Vector had 12 and Air New Zealand had 75. And it seemed that Air New Zealand were the ones who were going to maximise that 2-week trial. And so I'm very interested to know. So if the Minister could provide that information, I think it would justify the inclusion of this particular amendment to the Land Transport Act of 1998 in this particular piece of legislation. And just finally, I'd like to do a bit of a shout-out to a man called Toa Greening, who's a resident of Manurewa. And Toa came to see me in 2014 because he had this aspiration to bring a Tango model mini electric vehicle that at that time was priced at $230,000, but if somebody, I think he was hoping Wellington City Council were going to order 2,000 of these electric vehicles, he could have got the price down to $29,000. And so I know Toa has been very active in this area, and in fact in 2015 Auckland Transport put out a tender for a partner operator for a citywide car sharing scheme that utilised plug-in electric vehicles. So what they were wanting to do was to obviously increase the demand of traffic on our roads and increase the uptake of those who are willing to buy electric vehicles. They initially wanted a fleet of 200 to 300 cars. They envisaged 350 charging stations across the city. They had 9 proposals. But I believe that, and maybe the Minister can answer this question, that tender was never filled. And so Auckland Transport has been active in this space for a few years. I think they're working with City Hop to, I guess, increase the number of electric vehicle users, which is a good thing. Because the reality of the situation that we're facing into the future is that we can't be reliant on fossil fuels. So any work that we can do to encourage the purchasing of electric vehicles. I personally don't have an electric vehicle. I have had a look at what a Mitsubishi Outlander will cost, and I think it's about 80 grand. So maybe when I'm looking at updating my car, I will look at those options. So in some ways I do think that provision in the legislation, Part 3, Section 17R, will encourage people to purchase electric vehicles, especially if it means, and particularly if you live in South Auckland and are trying to get into the Auckland CBD, if I can use a car lane that only trucks, buses and those with high occupant vehicles can use, it will be an incentive for me. But I'm just wanting to be reassured, as the House's Minister, about the research and the evidence that it has actually been successful, that particular trial that I highlighted. So if there is any information, I think it would be wonderful if you shared that with the House tonight, because not only am I interested, and my colleagues here in the House, but I think anybody listening to this debate will want to make sure that the provisions in this legislation and the changes to legislation are actually being done for reasons that have some evidence behind them. That we're not just window dressing, but actually we do have some compelling evidence to say that there is some efficacy in these proposals, given it is one of the specific changes that this piece of legislation will empower. Kia ora.
I call Gareth Hughes.
Mr Speaker, before I seek the call, I'd like to seek leave for the vote on Part 3 to be taken separately.